Purple Daily is daily Vikings entertainment. We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die.
I will ride with this group.
Seriously, man. Please.
And away we go.
All right, Purple Daily on draft every Monday right here on the Purple Daily YouTube channel and podcast feeds. Hit the subscribe button for daily Vikings entertainment. Purple Daily on draft once a week. Right here on Monday, we take the draft. We take the draft classes, the picks. We kind of turn into a year-round show. That's Tyler Fornes, Miles Gorham, Declan Goff here. So if you like what you hear, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. Helps us spread the word about Purple Daily. We have OTAs that have taken place. We're going to start with JJ McCarthy here in just a sec. We're also going to talk some UDFAs that maybe could be stealing roster spots from other players on the Vikings. That is going to be very interesting to watch. So another week of OTA and training camp or mini camp-like practices this week. Then there'll be a long break before training camp. So plenty of stuff to talk about. We're super excited for it. But let's start with JJ McCarthy here. So McCarthy, very raw, very long-term plan, being patient, it looks like is going to be the thing with JJ McCarthy, at least as he gets comfortable with the Vikings. I don't sense from Vikings fans yet that, like, why is our 10th overall pick or your first round draft pick kind of buried, and why is that taking place, and oh my God, did we make the wrong pick? I think it's more people understanding that this is going to be a patient build with JJ McCarthy, Forno. So when you see him, like, he's only getting work with the third or fourth team, and maybe he's missing throws, and we can't watch a lot of this stuff, but we can obviously read and report on it to a degree. What do you make of the patient plan with JJ McCarthy here as he kind of slowly gets his way into the Vikings offense?
Good. If you look at some of the better quarterbacks in the National Football League, they all wanted to go in with a patient plan. Patrick Mahomes started one game his rookie year because they already had everything locked up by week 17. They're like, all right, you know what? Let's give him a game. And he threw for like 230 yards, no touchdowns, and a pick against the Denver Broncos. So having a patient plan, I think, is good. I also think the Vikings have done a tremendous job PR-wise, as far as they aren't releasing a lot of JJ McCarthy clips. They aren't allowing those media in the building to take a lot of video of him and share it. And sometimes that's really frustrating, especially from us in the content business and then also fans. But it's also not setting unrealistic expectations, because when you post clips, you're not posting bad ones. You're only posting the good ones. So that's how the hype train builds, and be like, oh, McCarthy looks great in these mini camps. Dude, we've only seen like 10 throws of his over the course of the last couple weeks. That's not any kind of sample size to be able to make any real opinion.
And
plus,
people are already trying to dissect those.
Yeah, and you know what? I think it's good because Luke Braun, hosts a Lost on Vikings, is dissecting those, but he's dissecting them based on like the college film, and they are working on some mechanical stuff, and he's trying to look at, okay, here's what they're doing with the mechanics, and here's why it matters and why this is happening. Like, it's good that they're staying patient, because I think he needs patience. You know, I said a lot during the pre-draft process, like, it would be best for him to either go to the NFL or transfer, because I thought he was going to learn nothing more at Michigan. And being in the NFL, now he's getting the opportunity to truly learn and not have that pressure put on his back. And as he continues to learn these mechanics and get those ironed out, I think training camp's going to show us a lot about where he's at. And if those mechanics are, quote unquote, fixed, then I think you might be able to see that hype train start rolling. But right now, I think they're doing a really good job from the outside looking in, because there's really no overhyping. There's no panic. It's just, hey, we're in this for the long haul. We took him 10th overall, and we're going to make sure we do right by him. And so far, it appears that's exactly what they're doing.
Miles is at least he played football at least competitively, unlike me and Forno, like just throwing the Michael Vick plays up in the backyard with a Nerf football. So Miles has that going for him, and you obviously spent some time interning with the Vikings back in the day too. What is your kind of sense with the protection, like, and that's just like not a media thing that like PR has decided we're doing this. That's a trickle down from the coaching and the management saying, hey, we're going to do everything collectively here to protect him. I guess, what do you make of just the overall, as Forno said, and as we've known too, just the bubble and the protection that they have placed around McCarthy?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're just building a plan for themselves and for JJ and to best suit him And I think if they felt he was a little bit more ready, and this isn't a negative, I think if they felt based off mechanics, based off all the things as he developed, he was a little bit more ready, we might see a little bit less of that. We'd see a little bit more of that true like hype opportunities out there from social media, the social media team and stuff like that. But right now they just don't feel it's necessary, or that they don't want to do that because they don't want to put that on him, because it's the way people can run with things. Like Forno kind of mentioned at the top, was like you could go and turn a couple small clips into like JJ McCarthy's competing for QB1 with Sam Darnold already, and like that, which we know just isn't the case. So I just think it puts themselves in a position to allow JJ McCarthy to kind of off in the background work and develop the way he needs to. It's not about like focusing on like what the outside world thinks or anything like that. It's about what needs to be done inside that building and on the field. And so I think when people hear things like JJ McCarthy got second team reps to end OTAs and stuff like that, it's like, that's great. Or minicamp, whatever it's called, like that's great. But in my honest opinion, I only think they did that just to kind of give themselves a better barometer of where they see him. Because I think the one thing I'm not worried about with JJ McCarthy is him knowing the playbook. I think like that dude's going to go in there and be ready from a playbook standpoint. He will like, that's just the type of person based off what we've seen in interviews and the way like everybody talks about him. Preparation's not like, that's the last thing I'm worried about with him. So like, I think they want to see on the field how he handles, that second team reps with guys and getting things, getting the formation set, getting, guys in the huddle, like all that stuff. How does he do it from a second team standpoint rather than like off on the side and like the training wheel side of the field that they got guys on, like the young guys on? I think they just wanted to see where he's at and like how they feel he's going into this final week before, they ramp up for training camp. And so I don't like to overreact negatively or positively to anything. It's just like, let the chips fall. They brought Sam Darnold in for a reason, because they knew that no matter what quarterback they were taking in the first round, we knew they were taking a quarterback. We didn't know who, but we knew they were going to take a quarterback. They didn't want that quarterback to be forced into having all the pressure to be QB1 by week 1. So it could be Drake May. It could be JJ McCarthy. It was never going to be Caleb Williams, but like those types of guys, any of those quarterbacks, they were never going to be forced into having to start week 1. It was let's see where they're at and let's make sure we have a starter in place in case that guy isn't ready. And so, yeah, to your point, like the protection, the bubble, I just think is always good for the players. When they're ready to bring him out, he'll come out. And so I think when we hear him be QB3, I would not be surprised by week 1 if he's QB3. That's a good thing. They want him to be ready to be QB1, not to be QB2, because when you're QB2, you could go into the game at any point. The starter could get hurt at any point, and that means you have to thrust that backup into the game. And they don't want JJ to have to go into the game unnecessarily. They want it to be a scheduled, prepared thing where they start him like, the start of the game, not in the middle of the game. And so they want that to be the process. So whether that's week 10, whether that's week 1 of 2025, that process needs to be played out. So let's we'll be okay. He'll be okay. The mechanics, all those things. I don't know how it's supposed to go for like what they want from him, but so some of the accuracy issues you might hear or see, that's not always because of JJ McCarthy. It's because of some of the new things they're trying to learn, and all of that they're trying to get him going with. And and so I wouldn't, like I said, I wouldn't overreact negatively or positively right now. Just say stay the course. Sam Darnold's a starting quarterback, and I think we should just continue to treat that as such.
So Forno, QB, because that's what I think my first thought on the draft party night at the Fillmore was, I wonder if that's going to be the case for him to start, of him being maybe like inactive or just QB3, not the primary backup to Sam.
And what's
Darnold.
The new rule now? That you can have all three like dress. So
and you can now dress as QB3 from the practice squad.
That's right.
Without taking
that's what it was. That was the new rule.
Last year, you had to be on the active roster to get that spot. Now you can be on the practice squad.
Okay. So there is probably a not even scenario, but like a likely situation where probably by week 1 he is not QB2, and it is like Nick Mullins, or I don't think it'd be Jaron Hall, but like let's obviously kind of continue down the path of the protection around McCarthy. When they open against the Giants in week 1, him being QB3 might be like the most likely landing spot for him, I feel.
I still think it'll be QB2, but I think Miles, in his discussion about him being QB3, makes some good points. My personal prediction and belief is that he's going to show enough they're going to be comfortable with him as QB2, especially when you talk about a PR standpoint. Having him as QB3 could be something that is kind of looked down upon by fans and talked about in the wrong ways, even though it's not necessarily that case at all. It's just, hey, like Miles said, we don't want him to feel pressure that he's going to have to go into the game, and we just want him to continue to learn and develop. And I know a lot of people reference, Jordan Love in 2020. I think that was just more to appease Aaron Rodgers than anything, because if you have that rookie quarterback when you're Aaron Rodgers, there's going to be a lot more external pressure to have that guy come in. And we know Rodgers isn't exactly the most, I don't know what the word would be here, but you guys catch my drift. I think McCarthy's going to prove enough that they're going to be comfortable with him as QB2. They just don't want to force him into being the starter, where I think being QB2 could actually be a really big benefit for him as far as, hey, you're going to be so ingrained in the game plan every single week and not running the scout team, which is what QB3 is going to be doing. And that process of working directly with Sam Darnold week to week and installing the game plan and doing all of those things, I think will be a really big benefit for him. And I think he's going to end up showing enough where they're going to be really comfortable with him as QB2 by the beginning of the season.
Yeah, I mean, Sam Darnold's obviously like the if de facto starter. I saw his viral little tweet. That was his real photo, too. That wasn't photoshopped, was it, of him like smoking the cigar on the golf course? You guys know the photo I'm talking about? That
I did see
over
that.
The weekend.
It's probably real.
I think it's a real thing, too, right?
Look, he's 27 years old. He's I think he might be Gen Z or something. Hell, when I was 27 years old, I absolutely would have done the same thing on the golf course.
Yeah. Well, actually,
I probably would do that tomorrow if I had the chance.
Was it black and mild or something? Like, who cares?
It looked like it looked like a black and mild, or like I don't think it was a Swisher because there was a tip on it, like a wood tip or like a plastic tip.
That was too thick to be a Swisher cigarello, and it didn't have the look of a Swisher either.
And if I'm being honest, I would judge a man that's smoking a straight Swisher Sweet at 27. I would have some questions there. Black and mild, different story.
Or like when you're 19 and call,
different.
Listen,
different
if it's grape flavored, I'm in. Like. I have no shame.
I love it.
I never got into that, but I know lots of folks that did.
Yeah. So Darnold being the starting quarterback for maybe even like, does he start all season? Like, is this a full protection plan for JJ McCarthy? Like, does Darnold start the entire year, and wherever they are at the end of the year, they are. But I mean, I feel like Darnold, it's going to be his job, obviously, to lose, not just in training camp, but during the course of the regular season, too.
I don't even know if it's his job to lose. I feel like they've put him in a position to where it's his job, like you would any other starting quarterback, and it's everyone else behind him is battling for those other spots. We haven't even talked like Jaren Hall. Like, is Jaren Hall just going to be a practice squad candidate now? That's what it feels like, which is fine. Like, I don't see any issues with that. And then obviously between McCarthy and Mullins, like Jaren Hall would have to play significantly better over the course of training camp and preseason to kind of risk of them getting rid of Nick Mullins and keeping Jaren Hall. And because Nick Mullins is dirt cheap, they know what they have with Nick Mullins, and he knows the offense better than anybody else in that quarterback room right now. So that's kind of why I partially said too, like why I could see McCarthy being QB3, whereas Mullins is QB2, because they know exactly what they have in Mullins. Mullins is that type of gunslinger, like that backup you're looking for, that you could just throw in the game and say, hey, dude, just go throw the ball 400 yards. And, you might throw a couple interceptions, but you got JJ down there somewhere. So, like, that's the type of mentality he's got, which is a good thing to have in a backup. Whereas, the second you put JJ McCarthy in the game, expectations come with that. Expectations don't come with Nick Mullins getting the game. That's just hey, that's a backup quarterback going to the game. We know who he is. We know what he is. He's not a starting level quarterback. But when you put McCarthy in the game, whether it's, in the middle of the game because he's QB2, or you set to play him as a starter in one of the games, like expectations come immediately with that. Whereas Nick Mullins, there's no expectations. It's, hey, dude, that dude's just gonna go sling it, and maybe he'll win it. Maybe we'll win a game. Maybe we won't. But like he'll keep us in a game, or at least he'll throw enough to try to keep us in a game.
I still think that Mullins is a likely trade candidate because, as you mentioned, Miles, he's very cheap. And when you have a top backup like that, it's going to be incredibly valuable. And plus, with the Vikings needing to maximize their draft pick capital for the future,
if you can get something for him, go for it.
Like I just think McCarthy's going to be one of those guys who proves enough where they're going to feel that Mullins is expendable.
That's cool with me.
And so Jaron Hall, probably a practice squad guy. For now, does he survive being on the practice squad? Like, does someone claim him? Or do you think he's probably safe being on the practice squad?
I genuinely don't know.
Safe.
Yeah.
I don't know what other teams think about him. I really don't.
Yeah.
Who knows with some of these backups, man? Nobody thought Tyler Thigpen was going to get claimed by the Chiefs.
That's a good
cut
call.
down day.
Yep.
So, like, there could be teams that just love him, and considering like the mixed bag we got when he did play, like they're probably going to still use that pre-draft evaluation. So, like, I don't know.
Switching gears, some UDFAs here that have kind of caught the eyes of at training camp of reporters and people that have been there. Let's start with Dwight McGolthern here. So he got some time with the ones, and again, we're in June. We're in the OTAs. We're going to be in the overreaction season, as we've talked about before on a few episodes. But Dwight McGolthern is in a cornerback room that we all are kind of have a shrug emoji out of, like, how good is that room going to be? We don't really know. Byron Murphy's the veteran guy there. They've shown some flashes with Mekhi Blackman and a Caleb Evans, but it could be a very, weak group for them in terms of their weakest link of positions. But Dwight McGolthern, is there a guy here at 6'2", 22 years old, a second team all SEC player? Is there a guy here that could surprise us? Could he crawl his way up and make a 53-man roster?
Yes. And I think one of the interesting things when you kind of look at the athleticism factor is how Kwesi Dofo-Mensah, from an outside perspective looking in, is utilizing data in order to make some of his draft decisions, and especially with undrafted free agents. So McGolthern has around an average profile. I think his relative athletic score is like 5.58. Did not test extremely well, and I think a lot of that had to do with the turf toe injury that he suffered during the season. And one of the interesting things I found when having discussions, I had Pro Football Focus's Max Chadwick on the Real Forno show, just kind of talking about the UDFA class. And one of the things that he brought up was that, like, they have a game athletic score metric that they just unveiled, and that's all proprietary data, so we don't get to see it. But he did mention that he tested as a 92nd percentile athlete with that, and that's all GPS data tracked. So when you have the GPS data, he's using that more from an outside perspective than he's using your general metrics. So like Jordan Addison didn't even have like a 60th percentile profile, if I remember correctly. And a lot of the guys from that 2023 and even the 2024 class didn't rank super high with that metric. But you know what they did? Jordan Addison had like a 93rd percentile. I think it was GPS tracking data in terms of speed. And you see that like the game speed on tape, and that's not something that like we can measure without that access to that data. So having McGolthern, who's 6'2" and is long and has that kind of game speed and agility, because it doesn't just track speed, it tracks change of direction and all that. It's kind of a cheat code right now because it's relatively new as far as how teams are implementing it and utilizing it and trying to figure out advantages. And I think that's objectively great. And McGolthern obviously has that relationship with Durante Jones because he was at LSU for 2 years. And then I think when Jones left is when McGolthern ended up transferring to Arkansas and then spent a couple years there. Like, it doesn't mean anything. We can't say for sure that it's going to mean something, but it sure looks like it does. And the fact that he got an opportunity to play with the starters at the end of minicamp, that's great. That's huge for UDFA to already be able to be put in a position like that. It doesn't necessarily mean he's going to make the team, but it certainly shows the kind of faith that the Minnesota Vikings have in him.
And Miles, I mean, when you look at some of the other cornerbacks, the Andrew Booths that are on the chopping block, I know Lewis Seam's a safety. It feels like some of these other UDFA guys and guys that were taken deeper in drafts or just deeper down the pecking order of draft positions are now like on the precipice of stealing roster spots. I mean, that cornerback room, as we just talked about, is kind of wide open. I feel like McGolthern and even like a Theo Jackson of the world's like, those are two guys that the Vikings will end up keeping over two other dudes that were top 50 picks in the draft. So it's pretty wild to see these UDFAs and these other guys being the ones that have stepped up here. And I personally, like, I don't look at that as a negative on, like, yes, that draft class is just going to go down as a bad draft class. But I do think process wise here, like if they can find like these diamonds in the rough that are better roster spots and positions to have in general, like I'm personally all for that.
Yeah. The worst thing they could do is hold on to guys just because of draft status after 2+ years. Like if you have enough sample size, you just don't think guys are really cut it and worth it, like move on and replace them. And I think the Vikings have done that. Mekhi Blackmon, Kyrie Jackson, Shaq Griffin, Byron Murphy, they said, hey, if these guys aren't going to cut it, we're just going to bring in enough guys to replace them and then they're going to have to earn a roster spot. Like that's just what it is. Like if you can't hack it, that's just like you're going to get replaced. And I think the best thing you can do is make sure you don't get complacent and say, oh, we hope this guy can continue so we don't bring in any competition for him. No. Bring in competition because you need to make that guy earn it. And I think they're doing all the right things in that case. And with McGolthern, I think there's an opportunity. I think I would love to know the context of like when we say he was with the starters in minicamp, I would love to know what that looked like because the way practice formats are set up, sometimes guys rotate in and out. And it's not just because they rotate starters in with starters. And sometimes guys just go in because someone, you needed a couple reps and that guy was next up in line. Sometimes I would just love to know context. Sometimes it always helps because sometimes it wasn't, McGolthern got an opportunity to be with the starters. It was, he just rotated in and he happened to be with guys that were starters. I would love to know context. I think it helps at training camp to get to see a little bit more of that. But I also think if that is the case and they rotated him in, again, I think it's a positive in that you get to see what a guy looks like with starters. And it just helps you look as a coach, as a coaching staff of like, okay, going into training camp, where do we slot guys in? Is McGolthern ready to step up and be in that second team, cornerback group? Is he ready to be on that third team, first team, rotating in first team? I don't know, but like where they feel he's ready, where does he stack up with starters in the, across our defense, the communication calls, all the things that come with it, going against starters on the offensive side, where does he stack up against with those guys? It's always important to kind of get that gauge. It doesn't mean that he's going to go into training camp as like a starter or even a backup. I just think it gives them a gauge going into the offseason of, okay, where do we slot these guys in going into that first week of training camp and so on. So it's just good opportunities for guys like him who was a UDFA and didn't get drafted, but maybe there's an opportunity for him to earn a roster spot because everything we're hearing is Andrew Booth Jr.'s not doing much. Louis Sean's not doing much. Caleb Evans seems to be mixing in a little bit more, which is not a surprise to me. He's like out of that group of guys, he's the one that kind of has a little bit more of like proven talent. And he's like an outside press corner, which they still desperately need. Shaq Griffin and Mekhi Blackmon. Mekhi Blackmon, I'm not sure what to do with him, but if they like him on the outside, that's cool. I got no issues with it. But I just, if they could, I would love for a way to cross-train him in the inside, and maybe Evans or McGolthern and Kyrie Jackson can earn a job on the outside with Shaq Griffin. But there's more room for McGolthern to earn a role on the outside because they don't have as many guys on the outside as, true press man corners. And, if he can really show that, I'm all for it. We seem to get him out of that number 47. Like, he's not making that team wearing that number. I'm like, I don't want him week 1 wearing 47. I'm sorry. It's like, maybe he could get a new number if he makes the roster. So
that is Joey Browner slander, Miles. I will not have it.
I know. I understand. But, we're in a new age. I can't. Different times.
He's probably going to change his number. Let's just be real, because
I know.
UDFAs get the bottom of the barrel.
Kyrie Jackson too. I feel like he's already. I know. I remember when he first got 31, he tweeted out something about not liking it. So I'm sure he's already looking for a new number.
He did tweet out I think it was I don't know, a few weeks later. He's like, I'm kind of getting used to this. So
for now, but when a number comes up that looks a little bit more looks a little bit nicer to ease into, I'm sure he'll jump at that.
Looking at the cornerback room right now, so I feel, and Judd, by the way, gave us his first 53-man roster projection, so if anyone hasn't checked that out, go check it out. I believe these were the 6, though, that he ended up keeping. Byron Murphy Jr., Mekhi Blackmon. He has Shaq Griffin as of now making the team.
Locks. Those 3 are locks, in my opinion.
I think Kyrie Jackson's a lock. He's a 4th-round pick.
Yep.
A Caleb Evans in pencil, but probably a good chance to make it. Probably better chance he makes and then doesn't make it. Is maybe a good way to put it.
And unless he absolutely does nothing during preseason
Or
training
gets
camp,
hurt.
I
Or gets
think
hurt.
he's a lock.
Yeah.
I do.
Yeah,
I think
I
so
kind of do too.
And then Najee Thompson, who's like a special teams ace, being the guy that rounds that out. So that's 6 corners. If they were to keep a 7th, or if, McGolthern jumps a guy, which one of those guys would he potentially jump is probably the bigger puzzle piece to figure out.
Najee Thompson's the one to try to jump if for any of them, right?
I think he jumps Lewis Seen. I think you, instead of keeping 6 safeties, you keep one less, and that moves to corner.
So the safety room would be obviously Harrison Smith, Cam Bynum. Is Metellus listed at safety? Yeah,
he's listed but he might play more safety this year because it sounds like Harrison Smith's going to play a little less on the field.
And then Theo Jackson, obviously, is probably.
And Jay Ward, too.
Well,
wherever Jay Ward's listed, right? Like he's kind of in that tweener safety cornerback group.
Yeah. He's a star.
Yeah.
By
not in the literal.
not
I was gonna say not in the literal sense. Even though I like Jay Ward, but no, I think not in the literal sense.
Star is Nick Sabanese for nickel corner.
It's what Josh Metellus played last year.
Yep.
Another guy on the UDFA class, Tyler Manoa. I know you wrote about this at the Sporting News over the weekend. Forno Manoa, a freak athletic guy, really, really jumps off the page there. Another guy. Roster spot bubbles here, trying to figure out where they go. And obviously the roster will be trimming down a little bit. What do you like, and what can you tell the audience about Tyler Manoa?
Manoa's very interesting, 6'5", 310, and he spent 4 years at UCLA. His first 3 he spent on defense. He played left tackle in 2022, and then he transfers to Arizona and ends up playing defensive line for them. And he played everywhere. He played mostly 3 technique, but kicked outside to defensive end, kicked inside to nose tackle. He was doing some things for that Arizona defense. And if you've been paying attention, Arizona has been on the come up over the past couple years. Jed Fish really revitalized that program, it had literally one game in 2 seasons. That's embarrassing for a Power 5 program, especially of Arizona's caliber. And I think Manoa has, with that athleticism and that versatility, could end up helping him make some noise during camp and the preseason. Because if we know one thing about this defensive line is there's opportunities there for these UDFAs to really make a mark. And having the versatility is something that Brian Flores absolutely loves, because then you can utilize them in different ways with different packages and kind of slide them all across the line. Think of how the Patriots back in the day would use guys like Richard Seymour. And I don't think he's Richard Seymour by any stretch of the imagination, but they have similar body types. And I think with that kind of versatility where you could slide all across the line, that's a very valuable asset to Flores. And we've seen that across every other position. Versatility really matters. It really matters in this regime and this defense. So I think Manoa could make some noise. And look, let's just be real. He's UDFA. He could also do absolutely nothing. But I think he's somebody really intriguing to keep an eye on.
Yeah, it feels like there's a few guys here with, again, going back to our point of Seen and Booth being on the chopping block. And yes, again, bad draft class. But some of these UDFAs are super interesting, man. And we can probably get into some other guys on a future episode of Purple Daily on draft, because even when we went over the depth chart with Judd, wide receiver, what did they do? Who is your number 3 wide receiver after Jefferson and Addison? That's a conversation that we got to figure out here of who is the best candidate there. But yeah, I'm really excited to see if any of these type of dudes. We haven't talked about Andre Carter after he was one of the big UDFA signings from last year too. So there's a lot of dudes UDFA wise that can make some heads turn at training camp. And
it sounds like Ivan Pace is wearing the green dot. I think that's a bit potentially wearing the green dot. That's a big deal.
Yeah.
Because I think we all assumed Blake Cashman would be that guy coming in, because he did it in Houston, and he's more of understands NFL defenses and things like that. So if Pace can take that job, that means he's staying on the field more. That you're not taking that guy off the field as much. And Pace kind of rotated in last year because he had to, because he wasn't wearing the green dot. And that wasn't because he couldn't handle it. He's an undrafted rookie. I think he played way more snaps than he even expected to. So I think
if I'm wrong, I think he wore the green dot at points last year.
Did he?
I think.
Okay.
I think
when Jordan Hicks got out with that compartment syndrome in his leg.
Yeah. Okay. No, you're right. You're right.
Yeah, he did wear some green top. But yeah, there's a lot of good guys we can talk about. So if there's any other type UDFA players or obviously 7th, 6th round pick guys you, the audience, wants to hear about, hit us up. We will gladly get into them here on Purple Daily on Draft. You can find us every Monday right here on the Purple Daily YouTube channel and the podcast feeds. Super excited to be here. We're going to talk a lot of these guys going forward this summer, and we'll be more pumped once the season starts too. So hit the like button, hit the subscribe button. This is Purple Daily on Draft. We'll be talking at you next week.